A few years ago, author Lucia Peters wrote an article called The 20 Best Things About Being a College Student. Some of them were pretty light. PJs are acceptable attire 99% of the time. You can eat waffles for breakfast every day if you want to. And no parental curfews. But others got to the heart of the student experience and why we work to improve it every day. Reinventing yourself and reinventing yourself and reinventing yourself again. Finding passions you never knew you had. Learning is fun, and everything is about possibility. Our students need us now more than ever. The student loan debt has been increasing at a record pace. Many are pursuing a degree while raising a family or working multiple jobs. Student groups are more diverse, and the path they take isn't linear. But they persevere. They power on to give themselves the future they deserve. They are heroes, and we are their advocates, their community, and their champions. We are here to lift them up when they need a hand and do everything in our power so they can become the great leaders and legends of tomorrow. We need to meet students where they are, supply them with what they need, and keep them on track with technology that provides support at every step. Their needs and circumstances are ever changing. They deserve educational access that is equally agile and technology to anticipate where they want to go. Let's continue to work together, clearing pathways to graduation and beyond, helping students make what's possible a reality.
I have no idea what they do. All right, well, welcome everyone to the Student Experience Keynote panel. My name is Clare Armstrong. I am the National Political Editor for the News Corp Australia tabloids, the Daily Telegraph, Courier Mail, Adelaide Advertiser and Herald Sun. It is my pleasure to be here today hosting these three wonderful ladies who I'm about to get to introduce themselves in more detail, but we have here with us Emma Hogan, the Secretary of Digital and New South Wales Department of Customer Service, Professor Karen Nelson, who is the Provost at the University of Southern Queensland, and University of Melbourne Master's student Kate Denver-Stevenson. We're going to be having what I'm hoping is going to be a fun and relaxing chat about student experience and all that comes with customer service and delivering the best for the thousands of people that access universities around the country every single day. So before we get into some fun questions, and feel free to submit your own via the app, I would love to be asking these ladies later on. I'm just going to go around and have each of you give a bit of a spiel about your work and your role, and we'll go from there. So I'll let you take it away, Em.
So, hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me this afternoon. I am the Secretary for Digital and the New South Wales Department of Customer Service. For those of you who are not based in New South Wales, and this is an unusual audience for me to speak to, it's 13,000 staff, and it covers everything to do with services that we offer the community, things like Service New South Wales. Each state has one in some form. It covers other brands you might know like Safe Work, Fair Trading, Births, Deaths, Marriages, Revenue, etc., etc. I think the thing that's different though is in New South Wales, department has been set up as the first of its kind in the world, and it's really to drive an uplift across government in really putting the customer, or you can swap the word customer out for student or patient or whatever it might be, putting them at the heart of human-centred design and the way we deliver both physical and transactional services. So we've been going about 4 years now, number one most trusted jurisdiction in the country when it comes to government services since we've been driving these changes. And I guess I've been invited today to talk a little bit about how to drive change and data-centred and human-centred change in what for me is a massive bureaucracy that serves 8 million customers every day.
Absolutely. Karen.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people who are the traditional custodians of the lands that we're meeting on today. I'd like to also acknowledge that these lands have been and always will be Aboriginal land. And with that in mind, I'd just like to say how powerful Megan Davis's address was yesterday. It certainly was a very emotional moment for many of us in the audience, and I'd like to acknowledge her and also Professor Bronwyn-Fredericks for their extraordinary leadership in this important issue for the sector. Those of you who know me will know that for the last 20 or more years, I've been working and researching and teaching in the area of student experience. So I'm really delighted to see a panel on the student experience in a plenary session at this peak conference for our sector. It's very timely. We've got the accord process underway, and many of us will have a lot to say about how we think we can improve the student experience, the student learning experience through that process. I'm going to save the rest of what I'm going to say till later on, Claire. Yeah.
And Kate.
Hi everyone, my name's Kate and I'm a master's student at Melbourne University. I'm studying public policy and management and I started that in 2021 part-time online. I also did my undergrad at Melbourne Uni and I've always been really involved in clubs and the student union and those like extracurricular spaces. And currently I'm working at CQU with international students on events, and I am the arts faculty rep at the Graduate Student Association as well.
Wonderful. Well, I should probably also let the audience know that these lovely three panellists here have had a real front row seat to what it's like in a journalist world, where I've sort of just been coming at them very last minute as the deadline of today approached with what I would like to talk about. But I really wanted to really begin this panel by addressing the elephant in the room, which is that we have just come out of a pretty extraordinary couple of years that have impacted the customer experiences in ways no one could ever have really predicted. Even this time, 2020, I don't think we fully understood what we would go through and where we are. So to start with, and actually I might start with the current student on the panel. Kate, I would love to know how you think the student experience has been impacted coming through the pandemic, and where is it now? What have we learned about how students are engaged with and go through that university experience?
I guess I'm in the unique position of I graduated in 2017 from my undergrad and started back at the same place in 2021. So I definitely saw the shift of what the pandemic did to the student experience and student spaces. And I think it really eroded away the opportunities students have to form connections with each other outside of the classroom. For me, when I moved to Melbourne to study at university straight out of high school, I really had very little idea of what that meant to be a university student. I remember jumping on a tram on Swanston Street that said Melbourne University in orange lights on the front, and I thought, this must be taking me to the right place. And when I arrived, it happened to be orientation day, and I learnt what that meant from the person making me an access pass. And I stumbled my way through the first semester in the same way, learning what referencing styles are, who a tutor is, and all of that stuff. And despite the help that the university had available to me, the thing that got me started on my academic journey properly was meeting other students and finding out from them how they are navigating being a university student. And they helped me plan my course and sort of showed me what my future might look like afterwards. So I think that student connection is really important and is missing from the pandemic, in the post-pandemic experience. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I might get Karen to actually pick up on that there, this peer-to-peer learning that Kate's talking about. In your work, obviously, you'd have seen and studied the benefits of that. Now we've come through that period, we've had in particular two intakes of, the 2020 and the 2021 first year experience in undergrad in particular, I imagine that has had lasting consequences. Where are we now, and what have we learned going forward as a result of that?
Look, despite those challenges that were brought about by that social isolation, what we learnt about our students is that they're incredibly resilient. So they're resilient to that change, and they were able to persist through it for many of our students. We also learnt that how nimble our universities can be. When faced with a crisis, universities responded as well as they could. And it did create a huge amount of social dislocation, not only for our students, but for our staff, who were then, working in their own individual spheres as well, and isolated from their students, which is the most rewarding part of being an educator. We also learnt that there was a lot of emotional effort going into the recovery piece. So students, and we know that their wellbeing and staff wellbeing is incredibly important to create a productive and positive learning environment. That was impacted by that social isolation, but we also saw, again, that resourcefulness of the individuals within institutions and the emotional effort that they put into doing what they could to continue the really terrific educational efforts during that time. What we've learned, I think, needs to be carried forward. So that's about being flexible, about being nimble, and being about ready to change and respond to unexpected events as well as we can without changing the underlying thing that we're good at, which is educating and supporting students.
And taking those lessons, flexibility, being nimble, I wonder, Emma, how that was your experience and the lessons during COVID on a more broad scale, but you're effectively dealing with the same situations where the old ways of doing things weren't possible for quite a long period of time. What did you learn through that?
Yeah, a couple of big things that stood out. So we ran customer insight surveys every week for 2 years during that period to really understand what was on people's mind. And obviously there was a lot going on around people's expectations about communications in particular as it related to school-age children or university students. Often there can be language barriers in a room full of a diversified audience. We really saw how much more challenging that became when everything became remote and online, and we really had to rethink translation services, communicative services very, very quickly. And the other thing that we really noticed is whilst governments for a long time have advocated for better regional connectivity, we saw, one of the things in my remit is the Telco Authority, and we saw a huge amount of problems with not everything was created equal during COVID. So when we went to online services, whether they be schools or telehealth, etc., regional opportunities were less than metro opportunities. And I think that's something that we've taken a real lesson from and understand we need to resolve a lot more in the future.
Yeah, just picking up on that actually, that divide, you've got the experience of New South Wales, but that would be the case in every state and territory in Australia. How did you, or what were the successful things that you felt you were able to achieve in bridging that gap and making the regional customers have a comparable experience to those that were in cities or more regional centres?
Yeah, so we worked really hard to engage the community indirectly in helping us solve the problems together. In New South Wales, we have what we call 6 customer commitments that we put at the heart of all of the services that we think about. They're things like act with empathy, respect my time, but the 6th one is involve me in the solutions. So we spent a lot of time on the multicultural issues. We spent a lot of time actually in community with multicultural leaders community leaders who really helped us how better to understand government services and how to better promote them. When we were designing services on the run, we also had mechanisms in place where you could give a service a thumbs up or a thumbs down. This is something we do for every transaction anyway, but was really important in COVID. And you'd get a 250 word box where you can put a bit of free text. So we had product teams changing things on the run in real time based on the feedback community was giving us.
That actually segues nicely into something I wanted to ask Karen. We were just up here before the mics were on, and she briefly mentioned a phrase I'd not heard before, students as partners, this movement that is growing. That really sounds similar to what Emma's talking about here, where rather than telling people what's good for them, actually asking maybe what is good for them and involving them in that process. Could you speak to that students as partners movement?
I'd love to. Thanks, Claire. Look, across the sector, not only in Australasia, but particularly in the UK, there's been a very strong movement to partner with students in co-creating their learning environment, and it's called various things, but let's just say it's all called Students as Partners. And it goes to the heart of what Kate was talking about before, that students who have a slightly more experience than their commencing peers know much more about what it means to be a successful student than staff. Students, if we can engage them right from the beginning when we see an issue, whether that be a program issue or a transition into university issue or navigating around the campus issue or what student accommodation might look like or providing feedback to their staff, if we can engage students right at the beginning of that process and say, look, we think there's a problem here, but we don't really understand it. Can you help us understand not only the problem, but to create solutions that will work for the university and in particular will improve the environment, the learning environment for students. Different universities will interpret that broad framework in different ways. But what we do know from the evidence in universities where a comprehensive approach has been adopted to students as partners work is that it has amazing impact on students' ability to engage in their learning, their success markers, however the students might define them, and also the long-term measures of success such as completion and time to complete. So it's a really fantastic, I think, initiative that for universities that are thinking about whether they should embrace it or not. There's good evidence to say it's a very terrific strategy that has strong positive impacts.
Have you had experience of similar strategies yourself, Kate, particularly in the work you're now looking at, working with international students, events, that kind of thing?
I'd say, I don't know, definitely not in my master's course, but a little bit in my undergrad with being involved in the student union and the sustainability plan that the university was putting together at the time. But I think we could definitely be doing more. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the other themes I wanted to touch on, I know there was a whole panel on the issue of international students, but they do make up an important part of the university student cohort, and they bring a different experience and often have a different experience to domestic Australian students. We've touched on a couple of times, Kate, that you've been involved in engaging those students. I wonder if you could speak to what that work has been like, what successes you've found, and where you think there's room to improve their experience, and perhaps even what you feel international students bring to the experience of domestic students who they study and learn alongside.
I'll just talk a little bit about how I think we can be better supporting international students. And I'd like to reiterate what Avasha and Manasvi were saying at the session yesterday afternoon about employment opportunities for international students. I think all students, but especially international students, are looking to their universities for assurance that the risk that they're taking on in doing their degree is going to pay off in terms of employment in the field when they graduate. It's a really expensive thing to do to get a degree, and for students that are paying their fees up front, it's like extra challenging. So if the university can show students that like you will have success, or show them how to have success or give them hope, I think that would be a really valuable thing. And some of the ideas that came out of that session yesterday about how to do that included like educating employers about the value that international students bring to their industries, and embedding employability in the curriculum, so it's not just something that happens 6 months before you graduate that's like an add-on thing. It's something that is like throughout the whole degree. And yeah, all students would benefit from that. I would benefit from that. The other thing is international students, like from the ones that I know, like have competing priorities of working and studying at the same time. And I think if universities can meet students halfway in that challenge by providing a timetable that allows for like the ability to work, that's going to take like a huge stress load off students while they're completing their degree. And I think this is something my course does really well. I think it's designed because they know some students are in industry already. A lot of my subjects will run like an intensive on a Friday, Saturday, or classes after hours, and things like that, so that you are able to like maintain a full-time job. As much as I wish I could be a full-time student, but it's not really a reality anymore for anyone. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I might just lastly on this, Karen, I'd love to know what you've seen in terms of that international student experience, how that's changed over time, how that interacts or maybe differs from the domestic experience.
I think one of the biggest challenges for international students is that they're dislocated from their family and friends and social networks, and they're in a country where the language that's spoken isn't their first language. They are often under a lot of financial pressure, as Em has already pointed out, and they are trying to, work out what the norms are of learning in that university. So they do come, with an additional layer of challenges that I think sometimes in our enthusiasm for, welcoming those students into our communities isn't always matched with attention of the wraparound support for learning for the whole person. So we might focus on, their ability to, write well in their discipline in English, but, we're talking about people here with really quite complex lives and very complex transition experiences. So I agree with Emma. I think we can do better. Sorry. Kate.
And the last theme I just really wanted to touch on before I can see we've got lots of questions flowing in thick and fast, which is great, was digital. It's obvious. It seems like an obvious thing to talk about. Well, before we all had to learn online over the pandemic, it's not going anywhere. There are new challenges, new technologies coming forward every day. I wonder, Emma, from your point of view, where you see the trends, particularly in digital and online, going in the future?
So a couple of things I would say. One is, whilst I'm a massive advocate for digital and digital with ease, I don't think digital is the answer for everything, and it doesn't provide inclusion or accessibility for everyone. So I always think there needs to be a parallel option that gives somebody a human face-to-face experience if they want. I think too often we look at digital as some form of cost saving as opposed to a productive way in which to engage getting through a transaction. I imagine from the limited research that I've done that students have a couple of different experiences. One is their transactional experience in their higher education. might be enrolling or buying books or setting up social networks with fellow students, or it might be the learning experience itself, which I would certainly rely on Karen to comment on more than me. But what we've seen around digital, so when I was looking at stats before I came here today, my most recent customer data tells me that greater than 50, the number one New South Wales customer commitment to the youth audience that we survey regularly, and that's considered to be sort of under 25, so more that undergrad potential market, excluding mature age students, is that the act with ease and respect my time are the two most important. They vary via cohort across age groups, but for this particular group, and that kind of struck me, the respect my time and let me tell you once. Why do I have to tell you multiple times if I'm going through the same system? So the joined up digital services, I think, is more important than just one-off digital transactions. That can itself become painful if you have to put your name, your address and your date of birth and your student number and, you know, what colour pants you're wearing that day in every different time. So the number one piece of feedback we're getting in New South Wales is around tell us once, respect my time, act with ease.
I imagine a lot of those themes appeal to the two of you in the university context. I throw to UK, you know, as much as students are obviously at university and engaging with university for the purpose of, you know, education, it is at some point a transaction. They are effectively paying, or by way of the government to start with, paying for a service. Are there areas in that interaction between, you know, the administrators and the students that you think could improve, and what maybe are some of them?
I think my experience in my master's course has been extremely straightforward. I haven't had a need to have those interactions, which I guess speaks to how well the system is running. But I do think that there are students that do have to have problems, and when their problem sort of takes them off the track of what the systems and processes expect of you, then it can get very complicated where you're talking to people in different departments and they don't talk to each other and you have to tell the other one what that one said, and it just, you know, drags on and becomes really complicated. Yeah, so I mean, I haven't had that experience, but it's definitely out there for people that just one little thing is different. Yeah. Karen,
I'm sensing that speaks to what you might have something to add on this.
Yes, look, I'll just give an analogy, if I may. I've recently had a major transaction, and there were two groups of service providers that I was dealing with during that transaction, and one assigned me a sort of relationship manager who was there. They knew about me, what I wanted, what I was trying to achieve, deadlines, dates, these sorts of things, and they were proactive with responding to me. They recorded information so I didn't have to repeat myself 10 times. They only called me when they needed to. They were available when I needed them. You know, so it was a very seamless experience, much like Kate's master's experience. And the other service provider called me about 5 times a day. There was no way of calling them back. They gave me unreliable information. They bounced me around from different departments. And in the end, I just got so frustrated with them. And I still haven't got the service connected. You know? So that's what we do to our students sometimes. And we need to do better. Because what we know is that there's no single student experience. Every single student has their own experience, just like every customer has their own experience. And we've got to get a lot better at understanding who our students are and how we can use some smart technology and data and information to provide them with the service they want, whether that be a learning support for learning activity or engagement with the university or a study plan for their course of study, in the format that they want it, when they want it, and that it's just crafted for them, so that highly personalised approach. We we don't do enough of that, and I think we have a lot to learn as a sector from other big organisations who have grappled with some of these challenges about removing that, if you like, that administrative barrier that for some students it just becomes so difficult to navigate that they give up in frustration, like I have with my service provider. So we could do a lot better. But I just do want to say a little bit more about the individual student experience, because there are a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues in this audience today are doing some excellent work around the student experience. And there's a range of initiatives that we know are important, but the environment in which our students learn is complex. So into that environment comes a whole lot of structural factors that can't be changed. They're in the past, where you grew up, where you live, what your parents, sort of education level of your parents. Then there's a whole lot of factors that come into the environment that influence the student experience, such as what we do as teachers and people who support our students, the culture of our institutions, and what students bring into that in terms of their preparedness for learning, their background. But what it results in is a huge opportunity for us in a transformational sense that can mediate those aspects of disadvantage. If we know to look for and design in those experiences that are productive for the student experience or student learning. And those things are, we know, that it's about emotion, it's about well-being, it's about a sense of belonging, and it's about self-efficacy or confidence for learning. And if we can design environments that trigger those factors, we know that students will be engaged in their learning, and engagement is a precursor of success, and success is a precursor of those important factors that we're measured on, retention and completion. But we've got to get smarter about highly personalising that transformational experience. And I see that the work that people like Em have done, and also the really strong R&D work that's happening in some of our EdTech partners, can really help us do that in a way so that it can operate at scale. So we're not just dealing with the students who, are the most noisy or the most present, but a universal approach to massively personalising the student learning experience.
And just to wrap this up before we move to the questions, there was a question that came up earlier that I think dovetails quite nicely here. It was directed at you, Emma, about how you've, in your role, kept the human centre to the service delivery and the models that you at the department have developed. And you said at the start, this is a world-leading kind of approach. So how do you keep the human factor at the core of this? They are the customers, the patients, the students.
Yeah, so look, it's been a journey. We've only been in place since 2019 in terms of being a whole cluster service. New South Wales, which has got a lot of sort of public high praise, has been in place for a lot longer than that. But so it's been a journey of maturity, I guess. But we never think of anything as launch and leave. So we don't launch a product and then that's the end of it. We have then a dedicated product team that iterate and iterate. So when I talked before about the thumbs up, thumbs down kind of mechanism, that's a very quick in the moment way for us to know if something's gone wrong, and there's a team that's kind of looking at that all the time. Then we have broader surveys. So what we do is basically use multiple data points to understand what's going on in the New South Wales customers' experience. We use that to keep checking in on what we call life journeys for various tasks or transactions that you might do with government. And we just keep coming back to those 6 customer principles. So it is absolutely in our DNA now. It wasn't at the beginning, but it's something that we've learned about and we've learned to do. And we know we get better results and higher trust, which is our metric, if you like, higher trust in government services, when we put the customer at the heart of everything we do and let them have input into how everything is designed. And if we get something wrong, or there's a legislative reason why something needs to be more complicated than a customer might like it to be, then we've also learned to add little pieces of information about why things might be the way they are. And that's been something quite new, something that we're just learning lately is we can't change everything, so when we can't, having clear comms as to why and when it might be changed if it's a sticking point. So it's just kind of become part of our DNA now, but we use data to drive it, not instinct.
Absolutely. And when we were preparing for this panel, I warned everyone that I was going to slightly throw them on the spot. Before we threw to questions, I asked if those who wanted to contribute could come up with either a really good or a not so good experience from their own time as a student. Maybe if it was good, why it was good. If it wasn't, what could have made it better. And I volunteered to go first, so I'll go first. Because I think it's important to ground these, high-level conversations in real-world examples. I'm going to date myself here by saying that shortly before I started my undergrad, the iPhone 4 came out, and it was my first ever smartphone. Very exciting. And it also coincided with the university I attended launching an online map of the campus, which was, for someone who had moved across the country to go to university, amazing, because you'd have a lecture at one end of the campus and a tutorial at the other with about 10 minutes to get between them sometimes, and here was a map. So this is a fence sitting on whether it's a good or a bad thing. Conceptually, great. The map only showed you directions as the crow flies. So the idea was extremely sound. The execution was a nightmare. It was like using a compass. You'd have to check
That's a great
your
reason
bearings.
why you would test with real customers.
Yeah.
Check your bearings at every block because you obviously couldn't cut diagonally through buildings, you'd have to keep readjusting. So I think that was the one that came to mind for me of so close, but yet a bit far. Kate, I might throw to you as a student.
Yeah. So thinking about that student connection again, in my undergrad, where I found that was getting involved in the divestment from fossil fuels campaign. And it's where I met so many people that are still my friends today, and probably why I value it so highly, but it also, this is a positive, it also provided me with an opportunity to have peer-to-peer learning with other students as we worked on the campaign together. I developed a whole set of skills that I still have today that I definitely wouldn't have if I just stuck to the formal education. So, yeah, that's my positive.
Karen, do you want to?
Yes, many of my colleagues know I didn't go to university straight out of school. I didn't go because people like me didn't go to university. My father was a fitter and turner, and my mother was a stay-at-home mother who left school when she was 13. That took me about 10 years to gain the confidence to go to university. And when I got there, I realised I was just as capable as everyone else, which was a huge shock to me, actually. And that process of not knowing and not wanting has really driven what I've done since I've been in universities. And I just want to think a moment, I think. And we've been talking a lot about the Accord over the last few days and the work that preceded that by the late Denise Bradley. And in her opening comments of that very fine report, she wrote about the love of learning and the passion for discovery. And that happened to me when I was an undergraduate, and there was something that all of a sudden switched on for me, and it's never gone away. And what drives me is wanting all our students to have that same experience.
Absolutely. And Em? You had a different pathway to your career.
Yes, I did have a very different pathway, and not dissimilar. I didn't go to uni straight out of school. Certainly didn't think I was clever enough, but also couldn't afford it, and knew that I needed to work. And I think that still stands for a lot of people today, this feeling of I have to work, I can't fund it, you know. But last year during COVID, when we were staying at home, I had the bright idea that I would do an exec certificate in public policy at Harvard Kennedy Business School, because they were offering online courses. Of course, in America they care not for the Australian Eastern Standard Time, so it was midnight to 4 a.m, the classes. But I had an expectation that it being Harvard Kennedy, you know, everything I'd read about it, one of the best schools in the world, and my transactional experience was terrible. For the 3 subjects that I chose to do, I had to repeat everything again. I had to submit everything again, just for individual subjects. I had to let them know when I'd finished 3 so they could connect the dots and give me the certificate. So I came to the conclusion that we were doing much better here.
I like the sound of that. Well, as I said, there's been a lot of questions coming through. Some have been on similar themes, so I grouped some of them together. A few that came through for you, Kate, were around, do you think universities can be more proactive around helping students, and what elements of the learning and teaching experience at university could be improved to uplift the entire student experience?
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about that, and I guess also like the online experience that I've been having for the last couple of years. My learning and teaching experience online has been really varied. Like, I've had some lecturers who have been so engaging with different varieties of ways to present course materials, group annotating and reading together, or guest lectures and breakout rooms and things like that. But then I've also had lecturers who've delivered a 2-hour lecture to us on Zoom, no opportunity to have a breakout or whatever, and so at the end of the course I didn't know who else took the subject, and it was pretty disengaging despite being very interesting content to me. I think the best practice of how to do online teaching is out there, and it's just about elevating everyone else. Also dual delivery, I have complicated feelings about. I did a dual delivery last semester, and it turned out to be really great. I was so desperate to get back into the classroom, so I started in person. But when halfway through, my dad broke his ankle, so I had to go back to New South Wales to look after him. And so that was good. I could continue my studies online, but I just felt the experience the students were getting online was inferior, and so I'm not in a rush to complete this degree. I just postponed the subject before the census date, and I think it's good that that is there for students to have the flexibility. I'm sure some students aren't so negative on the online experience as I am. So it's good that there's the flexibility, but it also gets very complicated in the classroom with having people online and in person, and I don't know how the teaching staff manage it. It would do my head in to try and manage all that.
That's some good feedback, which actually segues quite nicely to this question that is directed to you, Emma, from Louise Davidson. She's asked, could you indicate how you avoid survey fatigue with your clients, since that seems to be a key issue for students? We've just had Kate raise a lot of issues. I imagine you don't have a lot of time in your day, Kate, to constantly give this feedback loop to university administrators. How do the universities overcome that they obviously want the feedback, but they don't want to be so pestering about it that it stops coming? Yep.
So first of all, there are multiple different ways we get feedback. So we try to give you an in-the-moment opportunity to give us some feedback in a transaction. Most people who've whizzed through that transaction and are happy with it don't say anything. Others will, at different points in the way, give us real-time commentary or experiences, which is great. The survey that we have around customer service more generally across, which is a whole of government survey that we do, is an always on survey, and we're not targeting the same people all the time, in fact quite the opposite. So we have a varied response from different communities, and then we do more targeted and detailed research. So we have multiple mechanisms. Some are quick 5-second responses, some are detailed, are much more detailed, and we sort of combine them all. We also watch behaviours of how people are interacting with different transactions with us, and the standard metrics, wait times or how long people are spending on particular parts of a website, or all of those kinds of things. So we try not to rely on surveys as the only thing. We try to use multiple touch points to help inform us on what we're doing well and what we need to be doing differently or better.
Karen, one has come through for you, picking up on what you mentioned about the efficacy of student partnerships. There's a question here: do the different levels of government need to play a more active role in working with with universities to enable this? Is it something that goes beyond just the university administration itself?
The university system is an ecosystem that includes schools, compulsory education, vet education, different other forms of private education, and higher education providers, including universities. And I think that within a university we tend to think about it being the only part of the ecosystem. So I think there is a huge opportunity for that, and they're starting to emerge. We're starting to see state governments becoming quite active in the post-compulsory education activities through a variety of means, such as investment in campuses and that sort of thing. So yes, I do think we need to think about it as an ecosystem, and then have the key stakeholders who are contributing to, but also benefit from that ecosystem, being part of designing it.
Another question for Emma: a lot of the service improvements that you've achieved, this person says, sound expensive to implement and maintain. Is this the case, and how have you made and won the case for funding increases to achieve what you've done?
Yeah, so we definitely worked out early on, don't boil the ocean, do this one product or a couple of products at a time, test and learn, test and learn. I wouldn't say that it's cost us an incredible amount more to do digital, but I wouldn't say it's cost us less. So where you used to have, and this comes back to my point of digital being an enhanced service, not a cost-cutting opportunity. It can be in some instances, but that's not how I view it. If you want a good customer experience, it shouldn't replace the human experience altogether. But what we used to spend on lengthy checking your forms, for whatever service it might be across the whole of government, we've redirected some of that resources to product management teams, and then kept what we've needed for the human interaction experience. Those two cost things don't cross over at the same time, so there's a higher investment at the beginning and then it crosses over a bit later. But in the end, I would say it's been, in the end, for some products it's already net neutral, and others have still got a way to go. The reason we've been able to sell the investment is because the results speak for themselves, and the public trust numbers and the customer feedback we get has been, overall pretty great. And that's a good story when politicians are trying to invest where to invest, trying to work out where they're going to invest for improved services. So yeah, we've been lucky.
And I might throw this one to you, Kate. Why don't universities allow students to rate their experience with a thumbs up or down? Wouldn't that help universities improve their experience and make students more informed? What do you reckon? Thumbs up, thumbs down every time you go to sign up for a tutorial?
Yeah, sure, why not? I think we do have surveys and things, but yeah, I guess maybe there's like a sentiment out there with students that we provide this feedback, but it does nothing, or I'm not sure what happens after we do a student experience survey. And it's not to say that that information doesn't go and get used to make decisions, but it doesn't come back to the students about how it's being used.
That's such a good
I was going to
point
say,
and
it goes to
critical.
the communication piece you mentioned before. Emma.
Yeah, and I did leave that out, letting people know what you've done with it, or there being a clear link between what happened with this information and what didn't. So if I give you a super quick example, which I know isn't student related, but it's a practical one. When we went live with our digital driver's licence, so in New South Wales you can have your driver's licence on your phone. When we went live with that, about 2 hours in, we started seeing heaps of thumbs down, and we're like, what's going on? Like, there's something not happening. It was like NASA on the night we launched it. We had dashboards everywhere. And we could see it was everybody with a double-barrelled surname. Something wasn't picking up right. So we shut the whole thing down at 1 a.m. and brought it back up at 5 a.m. when the coders had engineering team had an opportunity to fix it. And we were able to say on the front page, thanks to everybody who gave us feedback overnight, sorry we took the system down, but it is now fixed. And then we get really great feedback for having listened to the feedback, and that's how you build trust. So looping back is actually really critical. And I think to the other person's question before about whether our customers get survey fatigue, probably some do, and some people will just never be motivated to complete that information. But for those that do, that don't get it, I suspect it's because they know we do something with it.
Yeah.
We don't ask unless we're going to act on it.
So the most upvoted question at the moment, Karen, actually goes to what you were saying before with your analogy, and it's how can universities give students a joined-up experience so that they don't have to bounce from one department to another to get help? What can we learn from Service New South Wales or other organisations? In your experience at universities, what is working in terms of that interoperability, I suppose, of the different aspects?
I'm sure there are some universities who are doing this well or better than others, but essentially we know a lot about our students when they come in, but then we ask them a whole lot of stuff about who they are again. We know what programs they've enrolled in. We probably know a lot about where they come from and their previous educational experience, but we don't use that information to craft an individual experience for that student, which sets them up for success and points them in the right direction through their learning to the career outcome that they see that they want. So, but I think it's more than just the use of data and smart technology and AI to give us that complete individual picture. It's how do we change and I can see a question there, and I do want to get it on the radar, the culture and mindset of our institutions. And so we can have the smartest technology, but if the culture and mindset about, students are the most important beings within our ecosystem, then all the data and the information in the world's not going to improve things to the extent that it should. So I'm really keen to explore what, if I could take the opportunity to ask Em that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't really know. When we talk about interoperability, you sort of back to boiling the ocean. So I think if you let perfection get in the way of good enough, you'll never get started. You've got to address the things that have the most pain points and then connect the dots as you go. Or that's been my experience. I'm not saying that's the only experience. Otherwise, you'll spend years planning design and the perfect picture and the perfect policy and how this one will talk to this one. And by the time you actually launch it, your ideas will be too old because digital moves at such a rate. So I really do think that interoperability is the ultimate, but step by step is okay.
And so how does that link to the cultural mindset? How do you get everyone on board with what you're trying to achieve?
Well, in my world, I've always believed, and I spent 20 plus years in the private sector before I went into government. I've never seen an organisation achieve great customer results without having a great employee experience. So I've always focused very much on lifting the culture of our organisation, being really clear on the strategy, and sort of letting the employees take it from there, if you like. And that's worked really well for us. We have the highest engagement results in the sector at customer service in New South Wales, which is something I'm very proud of, and I think that shows in the customer results and the digital results that we get.
This is a mean question, but I'd love to hear your response to it, Kate. Mean in that it's so broad, and we're putting you on the spot. But someone's asked, what does the perfect university look like?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. One thing I really enjoy about doing my master's that I missed in doing my undergrad is that I have we are a cohort. We're probably 200-ish students. And that's a manageable amount of people to know and go through an experience together. Whereas my arts degree, I don't know how many thousands of people started with me that year, but I never had the same face in a classroom. It was just always different people. And yeah, coming straight from high school, that is a totally different experience to a high school experience. And it's different to the workplace. That's a unique thing to go somewhere every day and never see the same person. So I think, I maybe the perfect university is small.
Or maybe provides opportunities so that you can build those connections more meaningfully than perhaps just coming into contact and then never really having the opportunity to reinforce the kinds of relationships that make the experience more meaningful, maybe. I was projecting a little bit. Well, we're almost out of time, but I would love to hear from each of you just lastly. We've been talking about the student experience, the customer experience, what's working, how we get the most out of what we're, the bang for the buck, how we incrementally seek these improvements, and what's out there for students in the future. I'd love to maybe finish on a quick thought from each of you of where are things going? What are you focused on as the next, incremental thing that you think is going to make the difference on the experience? I'll start with you at this end, Emma.
Well, we're focused on ongoing improvement, but the thing that I'm looking into the most at the moment, without wanting to terrify anybody, because I'm not saying we'll do anything with it, but it is on my mind, is where the metaverse is going to take us. Particularly in remote services and services for vulnerable cohorts. I think the metaverse right now is where social media was 10 years ago. There's huge issues with it around regulatory issues and paying for it, and the experience in it isn't always great, but I think it's going to take off nevertheless. So I'd like us to form some early views and some early principles about what role that might play in a digital landscape in the longer term. So it sounds a bit sort of out there and far forward, but I'm worried if we don't think about it now and start to explore options, we'll find ourselves in 10 years from now where we sometimes feel now about we are not up to speed with digital communication channels because we've sort of resisted them, and I think there's a bigger opportunity than that going forward.
We got the perfect uni out of Kate, so I might just come to you, Karen. What's next? What's on the horizon for you?
Design for the future. So work with our students to design a future experience that they wish they'd had, and go about building it slowly, keeping in mind that we've got expertise in our ecosystem and we should use it. We need better metrics, we need better data, and that's at a sector level. And harnessing that and using that data to design the future with our students.
Wonderful. The red clock is flashing at me. Thank you so much, Emma, Karen, Kate. It's been an amazing, engaging discussion. Thank you, everyone that was here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
The internationalization of higher education through mobility of students has grown considerably over the past few years. They add to the skilled workforce and create meaningful connections. But also, there have been instances of documentary frauds at the time of admission. To eliminate that, a thorough background check is required by the institutions. This is where the need of a trusted credential evaluation partner, CredEvaluate Global, arises, who follows due diligence, ensuring the onboarding of only genuine candidates to top institutions. Specializing in assessing frauds, CredEvaluate Global conducts due diligence using AI-powered software platform CredEvaluate Assessment Central to assess the credentials of the applicants. We consistently achieve operational excellence in faster turnaround time with high quality, integrity, ethics, and transparency. We endeavor to become the trusted and preferred compliance partner to the global institutions.